Landlords and property owners in Monterrey, California are fed up with politicians and are calling them fascists after they tried to pass a landlord rental registry. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and once again, it's coming out of the great state of California. It shouldn't surprise the landlords there that their local politicians are not on their side. They are trying to pass more anti landlord laws, rules, and regulations every single day. And in Monterey, California, guess what? They are now trying to create a rental registry that would basically force landlords to provide all of the information in all of their leases to the city with what purpose in mind? Probably to regulate everything about what they do and how they operate their businesses. So these landlords, they are not happy there. And they went down to a city council meeting and let their local politicians know that, hey, this is a bunch of garbage. You shouldn't be doing this. And we're not going to just sit here and put up with it. But you know what? They shouldn't be surprised, okay? I've been talking about how bad California is and how these politicians are not on our side for a long time. And I'm sure the landlords there, and they know this. They know this, but at the same time, they might have bought their investment properties a long time ago and thought that, hey, everything is okay, and suddenly are surprised by just how far left and how far, how much they can get screwed over in just a short period of time. Okay, so anyway, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So, just out of curiosity, the people who are out there in California, do you honestly believe that things are going to get better for you in the long term? Or do you believe things are going to get worse? I don't think you guys are stupid. I believe that you have rental properties out there. Are probably making really good money out there. You probably made a great deal of money on appreciation, especially following the 2008 recession. And you probably thought, hey, you know what? I'm never going to have to deal with the sort of problems that we hear about on the news. But then recently it just seems like there's been so many laws, rules, and regulations passed throughout the state that have just trampled all over your property rights. There's statewide rent control right now. A lot of people don't realize California has statewide rent control. They have laws in place that make it so that you have to pay relocation expenses to tenants. I mean, stuff like that. It's insane. It is absolutely insane. It is bad for landlords. It is bad for everyone, especially, and this is the thing that bothers me the most, right? The small mom and pop landlords, the ones who don't have, tons of other properties that can make up for the losses they experience when they have one bad tenant in their unit. Well, this is driving them out. This is driving them not just out of business, but a lot of them are leaving the state. They're like, you know what? I can't deal with this anymore. I'm going to move out of here. You're making this impossible for us. Okay. And yeah, I see the decline in population in California. I think California is a beautiful state. I think there's a lot of great people out there. I think that they have good intentions, right? And they pass a lot of these laws, not realizing the unintended consequences of what happens when you pass these laws. Okay, the unintended consequence is that housing actually becomes more expensive and less available, and it just ends up being bad for everyone. Oh man, I rant a lot about this stuff because I see what happens in California. It's slowly starting to happen in other places. And eventually it will end up here where I live in the Midwest. Okay. And that scares me. It scares me thinking that, oh, the stuff that was, normalized out in California, it only took, 10, 15 years before, hey, suddenly that same stuff, it's knocking on my doorstep. It's in the places where I live and where I invest. And I don't want to see this place end up with the same issues, lack of affordability, lack of middle class housing, super high amounts of homelessness, etc. Okay. Anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from the MonterreyHerald.com, and it says Monterrey rental registry ordinance draws vitriolic attacks from landlords. Let's get into it. Landlords, property owners, and real estate agents poured into Monterrey City Hall Tuesday to, in some cases, protest an ordinance that, if passed, would set up a rental housing registry, a database that would publicly disclose rental prices, addresses, and other data. Kim Cole, the city's community development director, explained that a registry is a collection of information, including addresses, rental prices, number of bedrooms, and 5 other criteria that would assist the city in better understanding the rental picture. If the council wanted to take further action in the future, it would have supporting data. The audience, almost entirely made up of real estate agents, landlords, or property management companies, attacked the idea of a registry. The beginning of a meeting even bordered on the bizarre when the crowd began calling democratically elected city council members fascists and made references to Hitler. One anti registry member of the crowd stepped up to the podium and told the council chamber that Nazis and fascists like rent control. Yeah, and that's what this comes down to, okay? There's only one reason why a city would want to have a record of how much the rent being charged by every single rental within the city limits is, okay? And that is so that they can control how much landlords are charging for rent. That is what they want to do. And if they see, like even if the landlord is complying with the state law and staying within the state rent control, right? If they think that the rents are being increased too much, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, we need to pass rent control. We need to get, look, the landlords, every year, the landlord is increasing the rent by 10%, which is legal according to the state law, or I think it's 10% in California. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, they're increasing it to the maximum amount allowed by the state every year, but we think that's too much. And so we're going to force landlords to only be able to raise rent 3% or some, arbitrary number that they come up with in their head. Okay, that is the reason they want this information. And they also want to go after. They're like, oh, we're going to go after those landlords who are not complying with the law. No, what you're going to do is you're going to hit landlords who were keeping their housing affordable and were following the law and force them into becoming criminals, essentially. So anyway, let me continue. Are the Jews next? He said. You're out Hitlering Hitler. One caller, renters advocate Esther Malkin, who is Jewish, said after the meeting that she couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was disgraceful, she said. It was insulting and diminishes the horror of the Holocaust. One member of the audience who spoke, Charlene Carter, said that 5 council members on the dais deciding on a registry ordinance isn't democratic. Are you going to go from house to house like Nazi Germany? Carter asked. If you're not a property owner, then you shouldn't be weighing in. And what I think that they're so upset about is that rather than putting this rental registry thing, ordinance thing up to voters to decide, they're letting 5 people on city council who all had to be elected and probably were elected by a majority of renters. Keep that in mind because, they mentioned later in the article, I've read the article already, but they mentioned that some of the city council members are landlords, right? And they're like, well, almost implying as though a landlord wouldn't work against the best interests of other landlords. And I've told you many times that just is not the case. So many landlords are only concerned about themselves, right? That they just don't care what happens to other landlords out there. So if you own like one single family house and your house doesn't have to abide by all the rules of rent control because it's just a single family home, then you're like, oh yeah, I've got no problem with rent control at all. So then you screw over all the landlords who own a multi-family, who, like the guy down the street who owns a duplex, he gets completely screwed over by you because you just didn't care. And, what will end up happening eventually they're going to change the law, and then they're going to go after all landlords. That's why I say we have to stand up for all landlords, even the big corporate landlords, because at first they only target the certain specific groups, right? And if you allow them to do that, they will eventually come after you. Turned out that all five council members are property owners. Councilman Alan Hoffa, who himself is a landlord, said calling the council fascist wasn't helping the landlord's cause. They also kept referring to the ordinance as rent control. Several council members had to remind the audience that the meeting was not about rent control. Malkin, the founder of the rental advocacy group Monterrey Renters United, said that counter to what some say, the council has been listening to them, but to say the council should only listen to landlords is the definition of entitlement. She said the council is also listening to their constituents who are also renters and who are struggling. When it comes to a law where the landlord has to spend all the money, all the time, all the effort to comply with that law, well, why the heck are you asking tenants anything about it? Okay? The tenant doesn't have to do anything. The landlord is the one who has to jump through all the hoops. The landlord is the one who has to, fill out the registry, who has to pay any fees associated for the registry, who has to, do everything. The one who has to pay any fines for not complying. All of that is on the landlord. So if the landlord has to do all of that stuff and the tenant doesn't have to do anything, then who gives a darn what the tenant thinks? Okay? The landlord is the one who ultimately will pay the price of any new ordinance being put into place. So that is why, in my opinion, yeah, you should only be talking to the landlord. The tenant is only going to act in there. Anything that keeps their rent low and cheap or free, that's the only thing they care about. Even if it is counterproductive and it would actually hurt the city, would actually hurt the landlord and put them out of business. They don't give a darn about any of that. Okay, the only thing they care about is themselves. They have a very much their own interest in mind. The landlord, on the other hand, right, they have to serve a customer. So they have to keep their customer happy, which is the tenant. They have to abide by the laws and the rules of the city, right? So they have to keep the city happy in order to keep operating their business. And, they have to make a profit for themselves as well. So the landlord has all these different groups of people that they must please, whereas the tenant only has to please themselves. Okay, they don't have to impress the city. They don't have to do anything for the city. They don't have to do anything for the landlord. Okay, the only thing they have to do is take care of themselves. That's why, in my opinion, when you're talking about an ordinance like this, you need to talk to the property owners. They are the biggest stakeholders. They are the most important ones. And you know, I'm not going to say that the city is that these city council members are fascists or any of that, but if they are property owners, if they are landlords, they should understand where these other landlords are coming from and why they are so upset. So, interesting article. I'll put a link to the article down in the description. You can read the rest there. But for now, I'm on the side of these landlords. I don't like this at all.